Stop for just a moment, because what you're about to hear may arrive at exactly the right time. There are moments in life that seem completely ordinary until we look back and realize they were quietly changing everything behind the scenes. This may be one of those moments. Somewhere, without you realizing it, your soulmate has started experiencing a series of unexpected signs that keep leading them back to thoughts of you. These aren't loud or dramatic events that anyone else would notice. They are the kind of quiet messages that appear when the mind is finally still enough to pay attention. A familiar song begins playing at the exact moment they are lost in thought. Your name, or something connected to you, appears in the most unexpected conversation. They wake from a dream that feels unusually vivid, only to spend the entire day wondering why it felt so real. At first, they dismissed these moments as coincidences. They told themselves they were simply overthinking. They tried to return to their routine and move forward without giving these experiences another thought. Yet every time they convinced themselves it meant nothing, another unexpected reminder appeared, almost as if life itself refused to let the feeling disappear. That is what has unsettled them the most. Not one single sign, but the constant pattern that keeps repeating when they least expect it. Every message seems to arrive at the perfect moment, quietly asking them to stop running from questions they have avoided for far too long. The more these unexpected moments continue, the harder it becomes for your soulmate to ignore what is happening inside their heart. They begin noticing that these signs always appear during moments of reflection, when distractions fade and honest emotions quietly rise to the surface. They never planned to revisit old feelings. They never intended to reopen memories they believed had already faded into the past. But something keeps drawing them back. Every unexpected reminder feels like another gentle invitation to pause and truly listen to themselves. They find it difficult to explain because logic offers very few answers. The experiences themselves seem small, yet the emotions they awaken feel impossible to dismiss. Slowly, they begin asking themselves why the same connection continues returning, no matter how much time has passed. Why does this person still occupy a place in their thoughts? Why do these quiet messages keep arriving now? The questions themselves become impossible to silence, and with every passing day, they feel less like coincidences and more like guidance, leading them toward a truth they have not fully accepted. What surprises them most is not the signs themselves, but how deeply those signs are beginning to change the way they see everything they once believed about this connection. And what happens next may become the message that changes their heart forever. The unexpected signs have not stopped. In fact, they have quietly become more frequent, and that is what your soulmate finds impossible to understand. At first, they believed these moments would eventually disappear if they simply stayed busy or refused to think about them. They convinced themselves that time would naturally erase whatever emotions remained beneath the surface. Yet something entirely different has happened. Instead of fading, every new day seems to bring another reminder, another unexpected moment that gently interrupts their routine and draws their attention back to the same connection. It happens when they least expect it, during an ordinary afternoon, while driving home, while standing in line somewhere, or during a quiet evening when their thoughts begin to wander. Without searching for answers, they suddenly find themselves remembering your energy in ways they cannot explain. They begin realizing that these moments are not demanding attention through force. They arrive softly, patiently, almost as though they have all the time in the world. And strangely enough, that quiet persistence has become far more powerful than anything loud or dramatic ever could have been. The more they notice this pattern, the more they begin wondering whether these repeated experiences are trying to show them something they have overlooked for far too long. As these moments continue unfolding, your soulmate starts paying closer attention to their own reactions. What surprises them is not simply that thoughts of you return, but how naturally those thoughts seem to appear. There is no struggle, no effort, no deliberate attempt to revisit the past. The memories simply arrive on their own, carrying emotions that feel just as genuine as the day they were first created. A smile they once considered ordinary suddenly carries new meaning. A conversation they barely thought about before now seems filled with hidden significance. Even moments they believed had been forgotten somehow remain perfectly preserved inside their heart. This realization catches them completely off guard because they always assumed that truly forgotten memories simply disappeared. Instead, they are discovering that meaningful memories do not disappear at all. They remain quietly waiting until the heart is finally prepared to understand why they mattered in the first place. That understanding begins changing the way they see everything. They stop asking why these memories continue returning and begin asking why they ever tried pushing them away. The deeper they reflect, the more they recognize that every unexpected message seems connected by one common thread. None of them encourage fear. None of them encourage confusion. Instead, every sign quietly points toward honesty. This becomes difficult for them to ignore because honesty is exactly what they have avoided for so long. It's much easier to stay distracted than to admit that certain feelings never truly disappeared. It is much easier to explain everything away than to sit quietly with emotions that refuse to leave. Yet the heart has a remarkable way of remaining patient. It never forces answers. It simply continues presenting gentle reminders until the mind finally becomes willing to listen. Your soulmate is beginning to experience exactly that. They notice that every time they stop resisting their emotions, a sense of peace quietly replaces the confusion they once carried. The questions become less overwhelming. The uncertainty begins losing its power. They are slowly discovering that accepting what they feel requires far less energy than constantly pretending those feelings do not exist. One evening, while everything around them became unusually quiet, they experienced another moment they could not explain. Nothing extraordinary happened on the outside. There were no dramatic events or life-changing conversations. Yet something inside them shifted. As they sat alone with their thoughts, they suddenly realized how often these unexpected reminders had appeared over the past several weeks. They began mentally connecting every coincidence they had previously dismissed. The repeated dreams, the familiar songs, the conversations that somehow reminded them of you, the moments when your presence entered their thoughts without warning. Looking at each experience separately, none of them seemed remarkable, but together they formed a pattern that was becoming impossible to deny. It felt as though every small moment had been quietly leading toward one larger realization. For the first time, they stopped asking whether these signs meant anything at all. Instead, they asked themselves a much more important question. Why now? Why, after all this time, had these messages suddenly become so consistent? That question remained with them long after the evening ended, because deep inside, they sensed the answer was closer than they had ever imagined. The more they search for logical explanations, the more they realize that logic alone cannot explain everything the heart experiences. They have always relied on practical thinking to make sense of life. Whenever emotions became complicated, they searched for facts. Whenever uncertainty appeared, they looked for clear answers. But these recent experiences refuse to fit inside ordinary explanations. Every attempt to dismiss them somehow leads to another reminder. Every effort to move on somehow circles back to the same connection. Instead of creating frustration, this begins creating curiosity. They wonder whether life has been trying to get their attention all along. They begin considering the possibility that some messages arrive quietly because they are meant to be discovered rather than announced. That thought changes everything. Suddenly, they stop resisting what they are experiencing and begin observing it with an open heart. Instead of asking how these moments keep happening, they begin asking what they are meant to learn from them. What surprises your soulmate most is how these quiet realizations are changing them from within. They find themselves becoming more honest with their own emotions than they have been in years. The walls they spent so much time building no longer feel as necessary. The fears that once seemed overwhelming begin losing their influence. They notice themselves smiling unexpectedly when a meaningful memory returns, instead of immediately pushing it away. They become less interested in convincing themselves that everything was insignificant, and more interested in understanding why these feelings have remained so resilient. Every unexpected message becomes another reminder that certain connections leave lasting impressions for a reason. Some people pass through our lives and slowly fade into memory. Others continue living quietly inside our hearts no matter how much time passes. Your soulmate is beginning to understand the difference. That realization feels both comforting and unsettling because it asks them to accept something they have quietly known for much longer than they ever admitted. Now every new day feels slightly different than the one before. They wake up wondering whether another unexpected reminder will appear, not because they fear it, but because they have started recognizing the quiet wisdom hidden inside these moments. They no longer see them as interruptions. They see them as invitations to become more honest with themselves. Every coincidence feels like another gentle step toward clarity. Every unexpected memory feels like another piece of a puzzle slowly coming together. Although they still do not know exactly where this journey is leading, they can feel that something important is unfolding beneath the surface. The messages are becoming clearer. Their heart is becoming quieter. Their understanding is becoming deeper. And without fully realizing it yet, they are moving closer to one experience that will connect every sign, every memory, and every unanswered question into a single truth they will no longer be able to ignore. That moment is approaching far sooner than they think, and when it finally arrives, nothing inside them will remain quite the same again. There comes a point when repeated signs stop feeling like coincidences and begin feeling personal. That is exactly where your soulmate finds themselves now. For days, they tried convincing themselves that every unexpected reminder could be explained away. They told themselves they were simply noticing patterns because their mind was making connections where none truly existed. They believed that if they ignored these experiences long enough, life would eventually return to normal. But instead of becoming quieter, the messages have become clearer. Every new experience seems to arrive with a sense of perfect timing, almost as though something beyond their understanding is patiently guiding their attention in one direction. They never expected something so subtle to have such a powerful effect on their emotions. Yet here they are, sitting with thoughts they can no longer dismiss. They have reached the moment where pretending everything is ordinary feels far more difficult than accepting that something meaningful is unfolding. For the first time in a very long while, they stop searching for ways to explain these moments away and simply allow themselves to experience them. Strangely, that single choice brings a sense of calm they have not felt in a long time. Not long ago, during one particularly peaceful evening, they experienced something that stayed with them long after the moment had passed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Nothing around them appeared unusual. Yet inside, something shifted so gently that they almost missed it. While reflecting on everything that had happened recently, they suddenly felt an overwhelming sense that every unexpected sign had been leading to this exact realization. The dreams, the memories, the random reminders, the quiet thoughts that appeared without warning, they no longer seemed disconnected. Instead, they felt like individual pieces of a much larger picture that was finally beginning to reveal itself. They realized they had spent so much energy trying to avoid these emotions that they had never stopped to ask why they kept returning. That question opened a door inside them that had remained closed for far too long. Instead of running from the answer, they allowed themselves to sit with it. And in that silence, something became unmistakably clear. The connection they kept trying to forget had never truly left their heart. It had simply been waiting for them to acknowledge its importance. That realization did not bring immediate certainty about the future, but it completely changed the way they viewed the past. Suddenly, moments they once overlooked began carrying new meaning. Conversations they considered ordinary now felt significant. Small acts of kindness became unforgettable. The comfort they once felt around you suddenly made sense in ways they had never understood before. They began realizing that the strongest connections are rarely recognized while they are happening. Sometimes life only reveals their importance after enough time has passed for the heart to see clearly. This thought remained with them every day afterward. They found themselves replaying memories without forcing them, almost as though their own heart wanted to remind them of something they had forgotten. Instead of bringing sadness, those memories brought understanding. They were no longer looking backward with regret. They were looking backward with wisdom, recognizing that some experiences quietly shape us long before we understand their purpose. As this awareness continued growing, your soulmate noticed another unexpected change within themselves. The fears that had once controlled every emotional decision slowly began losing their strength. They had spent so much time protecting themselves from disappointment that they forgot how exhausting constant self-protection could become. Every wall they built had served a purpose at one point, but now those same walls felt like barriers, preventing them from experiencing something genuine. They started asking themselves difficult questions they had avoided for years. What if these repeated messages were not trying to confuse them, but free them? What if every unexpected reminder had been encouraging them to become more honest, rather than more cautious? These questions did not demand immediate answers, but they created a new perspective that continued growing stronger with every passing day. For the first time, they understood that vulnerability was not always weakness. Sometimes it was the beginning of real emotional strength. Another surprising change began happening without them fully realizing it. They stopped focusing so much on what could go wrong and started wondering what could finally go right. This shift was subtle at first, almost impossible to notice. Yet it gradually transformed the way they approached every thought connected to you. Instead of assuming the chapter had already ended, they became curious about possibilities they had never allowed themselves to consider. They realized that fear had spent years convincing them that silence was the safest choice. But now silence no longer felt safe. It felt unfinished. It felt like carrying a sentence that had never reached its final word. That unfinished feeling stayed with them wherever they went. Whether surrounded by people or completely alone, they could sense that something inside them was asking to be acknowledged. Not urgently, not impatiently, but consistently. Every unexpected message seemed to whisper the same truth in a different way, reminding them that honesty always becomes lighter than avoidance once the heart is ready to accept it. As the days passed, your soulmate became increasingly aware that these messages were changing more than just their thoughts. They were changing their priorities. Things that once consumed their attention suddenly seemed far less important. Small frustrations no longer carried the same weight. Instead, they found themselves thinking about what truly gives life meaning: genuine connection, emotional peace, authentic conversations, the courage to stop pretending. These ideas began replacing the constant overthinking that had occupied their mind for so long. They started realizing that life has a remarkable way of bringing people back to the lessons they are meant to learn until those lessons are fully understood. Perhaps that was the purpose of every unexpected sign, not simply to remind them of someone, but to remind them of the person they were becoming through this entire experience. That realization filled them with both gratitude and humility, because they understood that emotional growth rarely happens through certainty. More often, it begins with quiet moments of reflection that slowly transform everything we believe about ourselves. One afternoon, another unexpected reminder appeared in such a simple way that it almost made them smile. It was nothing extraordinary, yet it carried a feeling that was impossible to ignore. Instead of questioning why it happened, they simply accepted it. And in that acceptance, they felt something they had not experienced for a very long time: trust. Not trust that every outcome would unfold exactly as they hoped, but trust that their own heart was finally leading them in the right direction. This was completely different from the uncertainty they had carried before. The endless internal debates began growing quieter. The need to explain everything logically started fading. In its place came a peaceful confidence that some answers do not arrive through endless thinking. Some answers reveal themselves only after we become willing to listen without resistance. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that truth in a way they never had before. Now they stand in a very different place than they did only a short time ago. The signs that once confused them have become sources of clarity. The memories that once felt painful have become reminders of what truly mattered. The questions that once created anxiety have begun leading them toward understanding instead of fear. They are no longer waiting for one final message to convince them that this connection is meaningful. Deep inside, they already know it is. The only thing still unfolding is what they choose to do with that understanding. And although they may not have every answer yet, one truth has become impossible to ignore. Every unexpected message has been preparing them for this very moment. A moment where they stop searching outside themselves and finally begin trusting what their own heart has been trying to tell them all along. That quiet acceptance is opening a new chapter within them, and it is leading them toward a decision that will change far more than they ever imagined. The journey your soulmate has been experiencing has quietly brought them to a place they never imagined they would reach. For so long, they believed these unexpected messages were simply passing moments, brief interruptions that would eventually disappear with time. But now they understand something much deeper. Every reminder, every memory, every feeling that returned without warning has been gently guiding them toward a truth they have delayed accepting for far too long. They can no longer convince themselves that everything happening inside their heart is accidental. There is a growing awareness that refuses to leave, an awareness that becomes stronger every single day. It doesn't demand immediate action, nor does it pressure them into making rushed decisions. Instead, it patiently asks them one simple question: How much longer can you ignore what you already know? That question has followed them through quiet mornings, busy afternoons, and restless nights. No matter where they go or what occupies their attention, the same gentle truth continues waiting for them. It no longer feels like something they must solve. It feels like something they are finally ready to accept. As they become more honest with themselves, they notice that their fears are beginning to lose the power they once held. There was a time when every possibility seemed overshadowed by uncertainty. They worried about disappointment before giving themselves permission to hope. They imagined every reason why opening their heart might lead to pain. Those thoughts once felt convincing because fear often disguises itself as protection. It tells people that staying silent is safer than being vulnerable, that avoiding emotional risks prevents future heartbreak. For a while, they believed those arguments completely. Yet the longer they carried those fears, the heavier they became. They eventually realized that protecting themselves from every possible disappointment had also been protecting them from every possible opportunity for happiness. That realization changed something important inside them. They began understanding that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing honesty, even while fear continues whispering in the background. And little by little, honesty has started becoming louder than fear during this period of reflection. Your soulmate has also begun looking at the choices they have made throughout their life from a completely different perspective. They think about moments when they trusted themselves and how those decisions, even when difficult, eventually brought peace. They also remember the times when fear made the decisions instead. Those memories carry a different feeling. They are not filled with anger or regret, but with valuable lessons. They now recognize that some of the greatest emotional burdens they have carried were not created by mistakes. They were created by unanswered questions and unspoken truths. They have discovered that wondering what might have happened often lasts much longer than facing reality with honesty. This understanding has become one of the most important lessons they have learned during this entire journey. It reminds them that while no one can control every outcome, everyone has the ability to choose whether they live with authenticity or endless uncertainty. As these realizations continue unfolding, they notice themselves becoming less interested in seeking approval from others and more interested in listening to the quiet wisdom of their own heart. For years, they measured their decisions against expectations, opinions, and imagined judgments. They worried about what others might think. They questioned whether their feelings were reasonable or practical. They searched outside themselves for answers that could only be found within. Now that habit is slowly disappearing. They are beginning to trust that their own inner voice deserves to be heard. Every unexpected message they have received has strengthened that trust. Instead of creating confusion, these experiences have slowly removed it. They no longer feel the need to defend what they feel or explain every emotion through logic. Some things simply resonate with the soul long before they make complete sense to the mind. Your soulmate is finally allowing themselves to believe that something else has changed in a way they never expected. They have stopped asking whether these repeated signs are real and started asking what those signs are inviting them to become. This subtle shift has transformed their entire outlook. They no longer see the messages as predictions about the future. They see them as invitations toward personal growth. Every reminder has encouraged them to become more patient, more compassionate, more open, and more truthful with themselves. They realize that this journey has never been only about another person. It has also been about discovering the version of themselves that no longer lives according to fear, the version that values authenticity over perfection. The version that understands meaningful connections deserve honesty instead of endless hesitation. This realization fills them with a quiet confidence that continues growing stronger with each passing day. There are still moments when uncertainty briefly returns. There are still moments when old doubts attempt to revisit their thoughts. But something is different now. Those doubts no longer remain for very long. Each time fear appears, it is gently met by a deeper sense of clarity that was not present before. They have experienced too many meaningful reminders to dismiss them completely. They have reflected too deeply to return to emotional denial. Every unexpected sign has become another piece of evidence that their heart has been moving in the same direction all along. Slowly they are understanding that clarity does not arrive because every question has been answered. It arrives because one truth becomes impossible to deny. And once that truth settles within them, everything else begins finding its proper place. Now your soulmate stands closer than ever to embracing what these messages have been revealing from the very beginning. They are no longer standing between endless uncertainty and quiet hope. They are moving toward something much steadier. They are moving toward trust, not blind trust in circumstances they cannot control, but trust in the wisdom they have gained through every experience. Every memory, every unexpected reminder, and every honest conversation they have had with themselves. They understand that life rarely speaks through loud announcements. More often, it whispers through repeated moments that gently shape the heart until resistance becomes unnecessary. Your soulmate can finally hear those whispers clearly. They know that something beautiful has been unfolding beneath the surface all this time, and they can feel that one final realization is approaching. The next message they receive will not simply remind them of this connection. It will give them the confidence to fully embrace what their heart has already known, preparing them for a new chapter where honesty replaces hesitation and where every unexpected sign finally reveals the purpose it was quietly carrying from the very beginning. Your soulmate has come much farther than they ever imagined possible. When this journey first began, they believed the unexpected messages appearing around them were nothing more than passing moments that would soon be forgotten. They assumed that if they stayed busy long enough, if they focused on other responsibilities, if they refused to give these feelings too much attention, everything would naturally fade with time. But time has done something completely different. Instead of weakening what they felt, it has quietly strengthened it. Every unexpected reminder has added another piece to a picture they were never trying to complete. Every coincidence has gently guided them toward a truth that has remained remarkably consistent, despite everything life has placed between then and now. Looking back, they can finally see that none of these moments happened in isolation. Every dream, every memory, every familiar feeling, every sudden thought that arrived without warning has been quietly preparing them for this very point. They no longer see those experiences as random interruptions. They see them as meaningful invitations, asking them to become completely honest with themselves. And for the first time, they are no longer resisting that invitation. As they reflect on everything that has unfolded, one realization continues becoming stronger than all the others. They understand now that the messages were never trying to force them toward a particular outcome. They were simply encouraging them to stop ignoring what their own heart had been saying all along. There is a profound difference between being told what to believe and discovering a truth through your own experience. Your soulmate has discovered this truth for themselves. No one convinced them. No one pressured them. Life simply continued placing gentle reminders along their path until they reached a moment where denying their feelings required more effort than accepting them. That quiet acceptance has changed everything inside them. It has brought a sense of peace they did not expect to find. The endless questions that once filled their mind have begun settling into quiet understanding. They may not know exactly how every chapter ahead will unfold, but they no longer feel the desperate need to control every possibility. Instead, they have begun trusting that clarity arrives naturally when the heart finally stops arguing with itself. One of the greatest changes they have noticed is how differently they now view the future. There was a time when every thought about tomorrow felt clouded by uncertainty. They imagined endless obstacles before allowing themselves to imagine hope. They focused on everything that could go wrong instead of everything that might finally go right. But these unexpected messages have gradually transformed that way of thinking. They have shown your soulmate that fear often creates stories that never become reality. The heart, however, speaks much more simply. It reminds us of what feels genuine. It reminds us of what continues returning despite distance, despite time, despite every attempt to move beyond it. Your soulmate has reached the point where they can no longer pretend that these repeated feelings are temporary. They have survived too much reflection. They have survived too much silence. They have survived every logical explanation that once seemed convincing. What remains now is something much quieter but infinitely stronger. It is a steady inner knowing that this connection carries meaning they can no longer overlook. Another beautiful realization has also begun taking shape within them. They understand that every unexpected sign has not only revealed something about this connection, but has also revealed something about themselves. They have discovered a version of themselves that is more patient, more emotionally aware, and far more willing to trust their own intuition. The person they were before this journey often searched outside themselves for reassurance. They waited for perfect timing. They waited for certainty. They waited for guarantees that life rarely provides. Now they recognize that some of the most important decisions are never made with complete certainty. They are made with quiet confidence, the kind that grows through experience rather than prediction. Every message they have received has helped build that confidence little by little. Looking back, they realize that each unexpected reminder was quietly teaching them the same lesson from a different direction. Trust what continues returning to your heart with peace rather than fear. As these lessons settle more deeply within them, they begin noticing changes that extend far beyond this single connection. Their outlook on life itself becomes gentler. They stop rushing every answer. They become more present in ordinary moments. They begin appreciating conversations, memories, and simple experiences in ways they never did before. They understand that some of life's greatest transformations happen quietly, without dramatic announcements or sudden revelations. Instead, change often arrives through repeated moments of reflection that slowly reshape the heart until a completely different perspective emerges. Your soulmate can now recognize that this has been happening within them for quite some time. The transformation did not begin the moment they noticed the first sign. It began the moment they became willing to remain open instead of immediately dismissing what they felt. That openness has become one of the greatest gifts this journey has given them. There are still unknowns ahead, and your soulmate accepts that with surprising calm. They no longer expect every answer to arrive all at once. They understand that meaningful journeys unfold one step at a time. What matters most is that they are finally walking in the direction of honesty instead of away from it. The uncertainty that once frightened them has become far less intimidating because they have learned something invaluable. Peace is not created by knowing exactly what will happen next. Peace is created by knowing that you are no longer hiding from your own truth. That realization has lifted a burden they carried for much longer than they realized. It has replaced hesitation with quiet confidence and endless questioning with genuine self-trust. They understand now that whatever comes next, they will meet it with a heart that is far more open than it has been in years. As this chapter quietly reaches its conclusion, your soulmate finds themselves looking back with gratitude rather than regret. They are grateful for every unexpected message that interrupted their routine, grateful for every memory that refused to disappear, grateful for every quiet moment that encouraged them to slow down and listen instead of running from what they felt. Without those gentle reminders, they might have continued living inside emotional uncertainty for much longer. Now they see those experiences differently. They were never obstacles. They were guideposts leading them toward greater understanding. Every sign served a purpose. Every reminder carried meaning. Every coincidence invited another layer of emotional growth. Looking back, they realized that life had been patiently speaking to them all along. They simply were not ready to hear it until now, and perhaps that is the most powerful message of this entire journey. The unexpected ways your soulmate has been receiving these signs were never meant to overwhelm them. They were meant to awaken something that had quietly been waiting beneath the surface. A deeper trust, a greater honesty, a stronger connection with their own heart. Today, they stand in a place that once felt impossible to reach. They no longer need constant reassurance because they have found something much more valuable, inner clarity. The repeated messages have fulfilled their purpose. They have guided your soulmate toward a truth that no longer needs to be questioned. Whatever unfolds from this moment forward, they know they will no longer ignore what they have discovered. The signs have spoken, the lessons have settled, the heart has awakened, and with every quiet step they take from here, they carry the understanding that some of the most extraordinary changes begin with the smallest, most unexpected messages, arriving exactly when the soul is finally ready to receive them.